Jerry Lee Lewis, I think, was rock and roll's first wild man, and he pioneered rock and roll piano.
Jerry Lee Lewis was a genius and a killer.
Jerry Lee Lewis was the killer, God-fearing piano player who also had the devil inside him.
Jerry Lee Lewis was born on September 29, 1935 in Faraday, Louisiana.
Jerry Lee's father, Elman, he was by all accounts a very good man, but he was often in jail, particularly for bootlegging offences. At the church that the Lewises attended in Faraday, there was a piano, which Jerry Lee gravitated towards.
Jerry Lee Lewis showed an intense interest in the piano at a very young age. It said that he used to play on his aunts and also accompanying his cousins who were a bit older and also played. But it seemed clear very early that he had a natural talent for it.
The family made quite a lot of sacrifices to get him a piano of his own. So he was absolutely committed to it. I think the impression I get is he was quite spoiled. He's quite doted on. One of the early influences on Jerry Lee was this place called Hanley's Black House. And this was in the black part of town. And it was a blues joint. So you'd have visiting blues musicians playing there. And it was a jig joint, you know, it would have been rough. Certainly would have been very dangerous for a teenage white boy. I think this is a very, very key influence on his musical style, because he grew up with church background, country music background, and here he was being exposed to boogie-woogie piano.
Jerry Lee was heavily influenced by Moon Mullican, who's virtually forgotten now, but at the time he was the premier hillbilly pianist of the Louisiana region, and his sort of frenetic, mad, keen style really influenced Jerry Lee's playing. But on the vocal side, Jerry Lee had two major influences. First, there was Jimmy Rogers, the bluesman, who had this sort of otherworldly yodel to his voice. And you can hear it in a lot of Jerry Lee's work. But also, there was Al Jolson, who was much, much more conventional. But what Jerry Lee took from Al Jolson was the ability of a vocalist to command his area.
Being from quite a religious family, Jerry Lee Lewis was sent to the Southwest Bible School of Waxahachie, where, well, it didn't go to plan really. He decided to play a boogie-woogie version of a religious song, which got him instantly expelled, and that was kind of the end of his schooling.
He returned home, determined to develop his musical career, and this meant that he played at clubs in his locality, particularly in Natchez, Mississippi, where he played the Hilltop Club, the Dixie Club, and began to establish a little bit of a reputation for himself. He was incredibly young at the time, and these were very, very tough audiences, and he was getting very hardened very, very quickly. One night he came home and plonked the money that he'd made on the table, and his mother was appalled. She thought he'd actually robbed a store, and she was distraught. She couldn't understand that he was earning this amount of money. And as he became more popular, then he began to get on local radio. He established a local name for himself. So the logical next step was for him to try his luck in Nashville.
Next Sunday.
And then there's this one.
Rolling, he was very, very...
To audition for Sun Records.
Do all the heavy lifting, and I'm going to show you what goes on the stages, what makes a great festival, and the scene that goes on around it. This guy.
So many people, I love it.
How many of you guys want to be on TV with me? Don't miss the premiere of my brand new series, Trunk Fest, Sunday, July 1st on Access TV.
In 1955, Jerry Lee Lewis went to Nashville to audition for the Grand Ole Opry, but apparently they were unimpressed that he played for the Louisiana Hayride, and in fact it was suggested that he perhaps swap from piano to guitar.
Lewis travelled to Memphis, Tennessee to audition for Sun Records.
Sam Phillips, who was the guy that ran the place, wasn't there. He was in Florida. But Jack Clements, who was the engineer, was there. And he said, okay, well, let's record something. And he recorded a version of Ray Price's Crazy Arms. That got the ball rolling. He was very, very impressed. And he became part of the studio staple.
Sun took him on as a session pianist, and he brought something totally new to their records with his rock and roll piano.
You can hear Jerry Lee Lewis's very distinct playing sound, his piano playing, on those early rockabilly records from the likes of Carl Perkins and Johnny Cash. And this is before, he's really making a name for himself. He's working as a studio musician, but you can hear that it's Jerry Lee Lewis.
The $1 Million Quartet is one of the great moments in rock and roll history. This is when Jerry Lee Lewis was in the studio and he's working with Johnny Cash and Carl Perkins, and Elvis dropped in. It wasn't planned.
And then there's this wonderful moment where the four of them start jamming together and just start singing some old classics together. Of course, Sam Phillips, being a genius, leaves the tape rolling. And it was, that recording was finally released as the $1 Million Quartet many years later.
If you listen to the original tapes as well, they start arguing about the Holy Ghost and, what form it takes and all this kind of thing. It's kind of funny to think of these guys who are hellraisers, famous. Elvis Presley was already the biggest star in the world, a big star in America. And there they are, arguing about the intricacies of, Christian piety.
Jerry Lee Lewis's second single, Whole Lot of Shaking Going On, was released in April 1957.
This was a top 10 hit in Great Britain and in the United States, and it captured the lightning of his live performance in the studio.
And of course it was quite controversial as well. It was quite a suggestive song, and some radio stations decided they wouldn't play it because of its suggestive lyrics. For teenagers, this just made it all the more appealing and really helped boost Jerry Lee Lewis's appeal.
And a few weeks later, he recorded Great Balls of Fire.
You shake my nerves and you rattle my brain. Too much love drives a man insane. You broke my will, but what a thrill. Goodness gracious, great balls of fire.
This song had been turned down by Carl Perkins because it was a little bit risky. And Jerry Lee Lewis himself, he said, I'm not going to sing this. It's too sinful. Until Sam Phillips said, yes, you are going to sing it, and it will be a big hit.
It was an incredible hit. It sold 1 million copies in its first 10 days of release, making it one of the biggest, fastest selling singles of all time in America.
The Steve Allen Show, he played a whole lot of shaking going on, and that was really when he became a phenomenon, because he wasn't just playing, he came up with all these different techniques. I think it started with him kicking away the piano stool. Apparently it just kind of got in his way, and then suddenly he realised that that could be his trademark. Then he was playing with his foot, the heel of his shoe, and of course then he was on top of the piano. So he became this great showman. He was the wild man of the piano.
In May 1958, Jerry Lee Lewis came for his first tour of Great Britain. And this was really meant to be a coronation of him as the king of rock and roll. But unfortunately for him, it turned out to be a fiasco. Secretly, the year before, he'd married his 13-year-old cousin, once removed, Myra Gale, who was also the daughter of his bass player. The British press found out. So naturally, conservative, post-war Great Britain was scandalised. And what had meant to be this coronation of a tour turned into something where Jerry Lee was heckled, where audiences didn't really want to go and see him. And although he was still an electric performer, this scandal changed everything for him. And the tour was very quickly cancelled, and he was back home a changed man with his career in ruins.
Oh, come on, baby, now don't be shy. Look me, boy, you better die. You leave me breathless. Oh,
The scandal also affected Jerry Lee Lewis in America, where he was blacklisted by some radio stations. And in terms of what he got paid to appear, his fees dropped dramatically.
Everybody deserted Jerry Lee Lewis. The promoters deserted him, DJs deserted him, Dick Clark, who presented American Bandstand, deserted him. So he had no exposure anymore.
He said the only people that stuck by him were Sun Studios and Sam Phillips, and he carried on recording with them. He made a whole bunch of great songs, actually, like What Did I Say? And most of them were hits much later. They weren't successful at the time. The only other person, apart from Sam Phillips at Sun Studios, who stuck by him during the period when he was under scandal was Alan Freed, who was the biggest rock and roll DJ in America at the time.
Around this time, he became addicted to painkillers and whiskey too. So personally, things weren't going well for him.
Jerry Lee Lewis had signed with Smash Records, where he did record a number of albums, but none of them, again, were that successful. I think partly there was still fallout from that earlier scandal, but also I think the arrival of the Beatles in America might have had an impact on that.
Jerry Lee Lewis got back on track with an album called Live at the Star Club.
He'll cheat and
The Star Club was in Hamburg, and it was the place where the Beatles made it. So it was a very good move. It hit all the right buttons, and it's a really, really good album. It was recorded in a way that they had a microphone in the audience, and then they close mic the instruments, and so you've got this very raw, live, vibrant feel, but with all the claps and cheers from the audience.
You're cheating will tell on you.
It was a reassertion of what a great performer he still was on his night. It was very, very easy and straightforward to understand how he'd invented the thrill and the excitement of rock and roll because he still had it.
In 1968, Jack Good invited Jerry to play the part of Iago in Catch My Soul, his stage musical adaptation of Othello.
He played Iago as Jerry Lee Lewis. There was piano playing. He never dreamed of shedding his Louisiana accent, but by all accounts, he was absolutely brilliant.
One by one, they're turning.
I think Jerry Lee Lewis wasn't expecting to really get back the success he'd had early in his career, but he was persuaded to record a country cover, Another Place, Another Time, and to everyone's surprise, including himself, I think, it absolutely shot up the charts, so much so that he quickly then recorded a country album with the same title, and again, it was a great success.
Heard you whisper we'd meet again, another place, another time.
Over the next 11 years, Jerry Lee Lewis became a bona fide country music star. He had 17 hit records. He was completely back in favour in music. He turned everything around.
One more time, repeat it, darling, take it from the top.
He had songs like Once More with Feeling, Since I Met You Baby, and this was country balladeering. It's much more gentle, a bit more reflective. But his voice was suited to it. It worked really, really well.
Chantilly's burning face, always take, hang down, wiggle in the walk, giggle in the talk. They gonna make that world go round.
1972's The Killer Rocks On was Jerry Lee Lewis's biggest selling album at the time.
What, baby, that's what I like.
He was just going back to his roots, and he became the most successful country star in the world. He appeared on The Monkees Show. he appeared with the Doors at the LA Forum, and he began to make an awful lot of money. In January 1973, 18 years after he'd been rejected by the Grand Ole Opry, he returned. And this was one of the most calamitous nights that the Grand Ole Opry has ever hosted. They said, one, you can only play country. And they should have known this was going to fall apart when Jerry Lee Lewis says, what country?
He performed, and of course he broke all the rules. He swore for a start, but also he played for around 40 minutes when he was only expected to do 2 songs. But he left the stage to a standing ovation.
In 1972, Smash Records sent Jerry to London to record the session with various British artists.
With a dollar in my hand.
The Sessions album with Jerry Lee Lewis was with Albert Lee, who's in 10 Years After, and Rory Gallagher, who's in Taste, and was a big singer-songwriter in his own right. And it was a success. It was critically a big success. And I think it was probably very good for Jerry Lee Lewis's image and reputation. It kind of updated him, but also it was honouring his legacy.
They were quite tense sessions in the recording studio, but it actually did create his highest charting pop record since the 60s.
July 1st on Access TV.
By 1973, the country hits were beginning to dry up, and he recorded Southern Roots back home to Memphis as an attempt to go soul again.
I guess I'm born to be a loser. Lord, a loser just can't win.
It didn't really work out. He was in a rotten mood. The album wasn't very good. It seemed as though his time had passed. He was heavily into painkillers. He was drinking far too much. He was in a permanently awful mood, so he was alienating everybody around him.
In 1979, Jerry Lee Lewis switched to Elektra Records, where he recorded the critically acclaimed album, Jerry Lee Lewis.
Rock and roll party on my last birthday, but it's good. Rocking my life away.
This was meant to be a new start for him, but he was getting divorced again. The IRS were chasing him for taxes, and not for the first or last time. They confiscated a lot of his cars. He was really in quite a tricky position.
Jerry Lee Lewis's nickname was The Killer due to his kind of wild boy party lifestyle, and also, of course, his energetic piano playing. And I think, you know, by the time he was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1986, he was very much kind of cemented as that icon. And also he had a big influence on the ceremony itself. He started a kind of impromptu jam during the awards, and it's something the organisers decided to then continue doing year after year.
16 can do.
In 1986, the album Class of 55 was released.
Roy Orbison, Johnny Cash and John Fogerty were among the musicians that worked on this album, which was a kind of sequel to the $1 Million Quartet.
Dave Edmunds was on it, the Judds too, and Jerry Lee did a fantastic turn on Luther Allison's 16 Candles, and it wasn't a great record, but again, it was a little indication of the esteem in which Jerry Lee is held.
In 1989, the film Great Balls of Fire came out with Dennis Quaid playing the role of Jerry Lee Lewis, and it was a really well-received film.
You shake my nerves and you rattle my brain. Too much love drives a man insane.
And I think it really put the focus back on him as being this revolutionary part of rock and roll history. And he also decided to re-record all of his songs for the movie soundtrack. So, of course, you know, in terms of bringing him back into the musical sphere, it was a great vehicle for him.
Great Balls of Fire probably introduced him to a new generation. You know, Jerry Lewis was a name that everyone knew, but by 1989 he was seen as, you know, quite an old guy.
2006's Last Man Standing was a duets record with several greats. Keith Richards was on it, Bruce Springsteen, Willie Nelson, proper A-list celebrities who were on it. And it became his most successful record of all time.
Oh, baby, you don't have to go.
Following the success of Last Man Standing, Jerry released another album of duets in 2010.
If I look like a mean old man, that's what I am.
Mean Old Man was an updating of Jerry Lee Lewis's style. So you had people like Gideon Welch, who's an alternative country singer. Alongside Merle Haggard, who's another kind of country outlaw, there's a version of You Are My Sunshine, which is, you know, the old Christian standard, but then also Bad Moon Rising, J.C. Fogerty, you know, Creedence Clearwater.
It's his 40th album. It shows that, you know, he's still rocking all these years later.
Well, everybody's hopping, everybody's bobbing, bobbing at the high school hop. Well, bobbing at the high school hop.
Jerry Lee's legacy is the outlaw legacy. He's the first wild man of rock and roll, and all of the wild men of rock and roll are following in his footsteps. And there was an element of genuine danger to what he did. He brought thrill to rock and roll, and without him, it may have remained as staid as it was before him.
The likes of Elton John talk about how important he was in showing him that he could play piano but also be a rock star. And then if you look at the list of people who were influenced by him, the list of people who've wanted to work with him over the years, it's an incredible legacy.
There was no piano style really before that. It was, you know, pianos in blues, it was in jump jazz, you know, it was in boogie woogie. So he took blues piano, boogie woogie piano, you know, jazz piano, and he found a way of inserting it really into rock and roll and rockabilly.